Hannah Arendt says you judge a society by the way you treat refugees, because refugees come to our country with no rights, with no civil rights. So you can judge the humanity of Australian society by the way we treat those who have no rights. It's an indictment on where Australian society is today if you consider the harm that is being perpetrated on totally innocent men, women and children whose only wrong is to get in a boat and flee a country where they're under threat of, or fear of death or persecution or harm, to come to Australia. It's just unconscionable, and I don't understand how we got into this place. The fact that our government officials are just turning their eyes from 10-year-old children who are actively attempting suicide just astounds me. I haven't seen that anywhere in the world. The government is in breach of both the Refugee Convention and the Convention Against Torture. What they're doing to asylum seekers on Manus and Nauru is nothing but torture. I've seen lives absolutely destroyed. I'm appearing in inquests for people who've suicided on Nauru and Manus, where taking your own life is easier than going on. Well, sadly, international laws are only imported into Australia through our domestic laws. There's no particular statute that says we are required to look after asylum seekers and refugees. You have to look at the arrangements that the Australian government's made between themselves and the government of Nauru and PNG, and then apply the common law, traditional tort law, to those arrangements. And we say that the duty of care for those transferees exists under common law. We are undertaking litigation on behalf of asylum seekers and some refugees on Nauru and Manus based on our government's duty of care. We're arguing, under the law, that we've put these people in harm's way, exercising powers under our Constitution, and therefore the Australian government has a duty to care for those people, and they're in breach of it. The difficulty in holding the Australian government to account is that they have transferred asylum seekers offshore to Manus and to Nauru. If they were in Australia, there is no doubt that there's a duty of care to them. There's no doubt. The problem in our case is that we're talking about transferees who are now living in prisons, open air prisons on Manus and Nauru. And we have to prove that the Australian government's duty of care extends to people in another country. Now, there are situations where that happens all the time. So Australian diplomats in other countries are covered by Australia's duty of care. Australian soldiers in other countries are covered by Australia's duty of care. We don't see any reason why people who've been picked up by our government and transferred to Manus and Nauru aren't covered by a duty of care. I'd been working with one of my clients who was an interpreter for a certain group of African women on Nauru. And one day I received a call from her, 3 p.m. in the afternoon, saying, "Help me. They've taken me to PNG. They're forcing me to have a termination in PNG, and I need your help." I asked her what had happened, and I was just horrified. She had a neurological condition where she'd been having fits. During one of the fits, she had been raped, and as a result of that rape, she'd become pregnant, and the Australian government had shipped her to Port Moresby for a termination. I was quite horrified by the circumstances of her situation. You know, I do a lot of this work, but actually having to hear a woman describe what had happened to her really, it shook me. It's like a boiling frog. The policies have just got harsher and harder over the years, and we've now forgotten where we started. It's just the most cruel and inhumane policy. And they essentially want detainees' lives to be so miserable that they either want to go home or give up. And giving up sometimes means suicide. What you're seeing with the cases that we're running and succeeding in is that very slowly we are holding the government accountable for the torture and trauma that they're putting these people through. They thought they could get away with this by exporting the problem to foreign countries, to hellholes in the Pacific. But case by case, we're holding them accountable for their actions.